The Date by Orlando A. Sanchez, a Montague and Strong Detective Agency short. Love is a familiar, love is a devil. There is no evil angel, but love. Shakespeare. Chapter 1. No magic, no monsters, and no mayhem. I adjusted my jacket in the mirror. I just want a quiet night out, a good meal, and better company. Monty sipped his tea and stared at me. As far as your ideas go, this one is horrendous. A hint of a smile crossed his lips. You should cancel. My suit, Armani soft wool, 2 buttons in black, was one of the lower-end suits in the collection gifted to me by Piero, the owner of Roselli's. Underneath it, I wore a gray Valentino shirt with no tie. I finished the ensemble with a pair of black Berlutis. How do I look? I turned in the mirror, giving my best profile and a 2 Eastwood glare. Modestly speaking, I looked fantastic. Be honest. Monty placed his cup down on the counter. What's the word I'm searching for? He snapped his fingers. Oh, yes, victim. That's what you look like, the victim of an angry vampire attack. I was thinking more debonair, I said, smoothing out my hair. Agreed. Monty picked up his cup and took another sip. This way I won't have to pick out a suit to bury you in. You're properly outfitted for your funeral. Piero would be proud. Hilarious. I looked at my watch and pulled out my phone. I dialed the number for Sunatran. Supernatural Transportation, or Sunatran for short, provided a car service for the supernatural population. Because being covered in blood and viscera and hailing a cab, even one in New York City, the capital of the bizarre, will get you cuffed and sitting in an NYTF cell. Sunatran provided discreet service any time of day or night to any of the 5 boroughs and beyond, for a price. The transportation they provided, and I use the term loosely since each Rolls-Royce Phantom was a tank disguised as a car, was the height in security. Sunatran, said the voice in a crisp English accent, how can we meet your transportation needs? Hi, Alice, I said, adjusting my jacket again. How long? Hello, Mr. Strong. 10 minutes, she replied. Perfect, I said, and hung up. At least change the time, Monty said, picking up another biscuit. I hear breakfast is a wonderful meal. Masa doesn't do breakfast, I glared at him. I made these reservations a week ago, and Katya is expecting the Masa experience. Of course she is, Monty said with a nod, and pointed at my back. Is that why you're taking your gun? Are you planning to shoot the sushi in the restaurant? I'm sure the chef will appreciate your assistance. I'm taking the gun in case things go magey, I answered, fixing the modified rear holster. Better to be prepared. Prepared for what? Monty took another sip. Masa is a neutral location. No one would dare attack you there. That, at least, was a wise choice. Since when do supernatural creatures respect the terms of neutrality when it comes to us? And by us, I mean you, I said, giving him the are you serious look. At least there I'll see it coming. That is a valid concern, Monty said, finishing his tea. One can never be too careful. Does Miss Katya know what you do for a living? And I use the term living loosely. She knows I'm a detective. I detect. I waggled my eyebrows and checked my watch. She's normal, the way this evening is going to be. She doesn't need to know about things like werewolves, magic, or mages. Or angry, possessive vampires, for that matter. Monty grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. Well, I wish you a pleasant, uneventful, and normal evening. Where are you going? I asked, surprised. I thought you were staying in." "I've reconsidered," Monty said. "I know you think this is a night out for you, but actually it's a night off for me. I'm going to have a quiet dinner at Roselli's with an emphasis on quiet." I considered leaving Ebonsoul for a split second, and then realized having it and not needing it was a better scenario than needing it and remembering it was sitting at home. I attached an ankle sheath as I thought about the odds of running into Michiko, or Chi, as I called her. Chi and I had a complicated understanding. To be fair, she was a vampire, and I wasn't. She belonged to one of the most ancient vampire clans on the planet. When feudal lords were fighting over parcels of land, her family owned entire islands. Her family also helped form the Dark Council, the ruling body of supernatural beings that governed all supernatural activity in the city. She was its current leader. Tiny, she barely topped 5 feet, and with her long black hair, looked more like an anime character than the force of lethality I knew her to be. In the distant past, she was known as Karitori Fu, the Reaping Wind. Tales of her exploits became legend. I was sure they still used stories of her in Japan to make children behave. She was also the one who gave me Ebonsoul. Like I said, it was complicated. The chances of us working out were 0 to 0. Besides, I had seen her out with escorts plenty of times, so it was only fair I enjoyed a night with someone else. My phone rang to let me know the car had arrived, snapping me out of my reverie. I headed downstairs. The valet held the door open for me as I walked outside to my ride for the evening. "Where's Andre?" I asked the valet as I stepped outside. "He's off tonight, sir." The valet gave a long whistle. "That is one sweet ride, sir." I turned to admire the midnight blue Lamborghini Aventador in front of the building. I was expecting a Rolls-Royce Phantom, complete with driver. Monty must have let Cecil, the owner of Sunatran, know this wasn't business. I slid in behind the wheel, and the car wrapped itself around me as the scissor door descended, enclosing me in Italian automotive luxury. I read the note on the steering wheel. "Enjoy your evening, Mr. Strong. Cecil." I placed my hand on the dashboard panel, allowing it to read my identity. Sunatran used innovative tech on most of its vehicles. The car started with a rumble and settled into a controlled purr. I gave Monty silent thanks and roared away from the building, headed uptown to meet Katya. Chapter 2. Katya Novikova was staying at the Waldorf on Park Avenue and 49th Street. She was only in town for a few days for a finance conference. In another life, she had been a model. Now she ran her father's international financial conglomerate, Novacorp Holdings, with an iron fist. Katya was the total package: intelligent, beautiful, dangerous, and normal. Her father, on the other hand, was a different story. Novacorp Holdings was based in the mountains of Georgia, the country, not the state. According to my digging, it was getting involved in handling the finances of several rival supernatural entities. In addition to dinner, I was meeting Katya to let her know this was a bad idea. Some of her new clients wouldn't think twice of retiring her early if they felt slighted or it meant access to a rival's assets. Once the information was obtained, that retirement would be sudden and violent. I pulled up to the front of the hotel and waited. Katya didn't like to be escorted. She made her bodyguards' lives hell by escaping them on a regular basis. The roar of an engine startled me. I looked over to see a red McLaren 12C Spider sidled dangerously close to me. I was about to give the driver my best New York City greeting, complete with one-finger salute, when I noticed who was behind the wheel. It was Katya. She flashed me a wicked smile and pulled her blonde mane into a ponytail as she revved the engine. "Good evening, Simon." She looked over at the Lamborghini with a nod. "I'm impressed. Loser buys dinner. Masa, yes?" I nodded, and she took off. Park Avenue was crowded at all times of the day and night. I swerved around several taxis, or yellow kamikazes, as I called them, and tried to catch up to her. The McLaren was fast, and she was leaving me behind, but it takes more than just the car. Winning a race also depends on the skill of the driver, and this was a Sunatran car. I flipped a few switches on the dashboard, and the Lamborghini hissed as it sank lower to the ground. I pressed a button, and the engine went from low purr to low purr with a rumble of attitude as the supercharger kicked in, taking the car from fast to escape velocity in a matter of seconds. I passed her as I made a left on 57th Street and floored the gas. Masa was located at 10 West Columbus Circle. It was a straight shot until 8th Avenue. She roared up next to me and forced me onto incoming traffic with a nudge and a smile. I swerved around some more cars and pulled the wheel hard to the right, almost sideswiping her. She took off, and I saw the McLaren drift right onto 8th Avenue. I cut into oncoming traffic on Broadway as I jumped a sidewalk. I nearly clipped the obelisk holding Christopher Columbus and drove between the pylons of his circle. I swerved around his statue and slid in front of the restaurant. The valet jumped back as I skidded to a stop. I stepped out and locked the car with a squeeze of the door handle as Katya joined me a few seconds later. A huge smile crossed her lips as she stepped out of her car. "You cheated." She undid her ponytail, threw the keys to the valet, and shook out her hair. A slitted black Chanel dress hugged her curves and revealed her long legs. She stopped to slip on a pair of strappy Jimmy Choos before she approached me. She was stunning, and she knew it. Her blue eyes gleamed, full of mischief, as I shook my head. "Taking Broadway and cutting through this circle was clever and risky." I didn't realize there were rules. I straightened my jacket and felt the comforting weight of grim whisper in the small of my back. "There weren't," she whispered as she leaned in and placed a kiss on my cheek. "It's good to see you again." I extended an arm, and she lightly rested a hand on it as we entered Masa. "Shall we?" she said, as we walked in. Chapter 3. Masa was an expression of Shibui refined beauty that wasn't affected by time or social changes. The decor was simple and minimal. Subdued lighting highlighted the deep browns and rich reds of the tables and chairs. I noticed several of the faintly glowing runes that were etched into the walls. To the average customer, they would appear simply as Asian designs. I wondered what they would do if a magic user tried to cast inside the restaurant. Large plate glass windows allowed us a view of Columbus Circle. I took off my jacket and made sure we were seated with my back to the wall. We faced the main floor and sat away from the windows. Old habits die hard. Katya gave me a knowing smile. Once seated, she handed the waiter a black credit card. "Fair is fair," she looked at me and smiled. "The evening is on me." Evening? I scanned the room for potential threats. Most looked like regular patrons, but I learned long ago not to judge every book by its cover. Monty taught me even normal-looking mages could be lethal. "Where are your bodyguards?" Katya waved away my words. "Tonight, it's just the two of us." For dinner, I noticed movement on my right, but I remained focused on her eyes, which were so blue it reminded me of those deep pools, the ones that triggered that primal fear but tempted you to dive in at the same time. Dinner and whatever follows. She touched my hand lightly. We have the entire evening. The movement was slight, but I noticed it was matched on my left as well. We were being flanked. Katya, I said, keeping my voice low. How's your father these days? He's well and sends his regards, she answered with a smile. He wants to know when you are going to visit. Did you tell anyone about our dinner tonight? I asked, noticing the shifting of energy in the restaurant. Someone or something was gathering power. I answer to no one, she said with a sniff. My plans are my own. These new clients of yours, the special ones, do they know you're here? They're harmless, Simon. She was annoyed now as I pushed the point. They're bored old men with too much money and not enough to spend it on. I wouldn't exactly say harmless. I saw the approaching landmass and kept calm. And you're sure no one knows you're here? I told you, Simon, no one, she started. Good evening, Miss Novakova, said the wall of muscle who stood next to our table, blocking the view of half the restaurant. To her credit, Katya didn't jump. She glanced up, and I saw her hand slide under the table. Mr. Strong, what an unpleasant surprise. Is your mage friend nearby? He was easily 8 feet tall and half as wide. Any larger, and he would have had his own gravitational field. I leaned back to get the complete image, and it wasn't pretty. He's in the bathroom. I scanned the room and noticed 2 men step to the side. That made 3, including tall, dark, and menacing. He'll be right back. That's a poor lie, the human wall said. Your mage is currently sitting at Roselli's, enjoying dinner. He pulled out a chair and joined us at the table. I heard the chair scream in protest as he sat. He knew Monty's location. This led to a few conclusions. It was more than just the 3 in Massa. They were following Katya, Monty, and me. The chances of this night ending peacefully were close to 0. Who are you? Katya asked, her voice a steel blade. Who sent you? I think the better question is, what are you? I felt the waves of energy coming off him. Human was not at the top of the list. He smiled at me. It was a gruesome thing of sharpened teeth and fangs. In that moment, I knew. He didn't intend to let us leave the restaurant. Not alive, anyway. I pulled Katya to my side of the table. My name is Gren. He flashed his nightmare of a smile again. I'm here to escort you back to the hotel, Miss Novakova. Now whose nose is growing, I said. She doesn't like to be escorted by large, creepy, whatever you are. Really, what are you? He glared at me. It was barely a 1 on the Eastwood scale, but the teeth added to the effect, making it a solid 2 on the glarometer. If you interfere, Mr. Strong, I will have to kill you. You're going to find that I don't do dead easily. I returned his glare and added some extra of my own to compensate for the lack of shark teeth. He didn't seem impressed. Miss Novakova will be coming with me. Gren pushed his chair back. Why don't you go join your little wizard friend, Mr. Strong? I was about to answer when the restaurant host, Roth, walked over. He was a tall, wiry man dressed in his usual black suit. As the host, Roth made sure everything went smoothly in the restaurant. As part of the Dark Council, he made sure the neutrality of Massa was preserved. Good evening, Roth. I gave him a quick glance and a nod. It's good to see you again. And you, Mr. Strong. Roth looked at the tableau before him, gave us a short nod, and clasped his hands behind his back. Will Ms. Nakatomi be honoring us with her presence tonight? Not tonight, Roth. I shifted in my chair to give me better access to Grim Whisper. I'm sure she's busy with council matters. Roth raised an eyebrow and nodded. I see, he said, glancing over at Katya. Since you are feeling daring this evening, might I suggest the fugu sashi? It is exquisite. The lady won't be staying, Gren said abruptly. She has business elsewhere. Why don't you go annoy another table? That is a pity. Roth stepped closer to the table. The masa experience is quite extraordinary. I do wish you would reconsider, miss. I sat back and crossed my legs, placing Ebonsole within easy reach. I told you. Fuck off, Gren said, staring at Roth and clenching a fist. This establishment is a designated Dark Council neutral zone, and violence of any sort is Roth started. Gren wrapped one enormous hand around Roth's neck, plucking him off the ground and cutting off his sentence. There's no violence happening here, Gren whispered as he stood, still holding Roth by the neck. We're having a friendly conversation, and you are interrupting. Roth may have looked weak and defenseless, but I knew better. The Dark Council ensured that those who oversaw neutral zones could enforce the rules with deadly force if necessary. Gren had just plucked himself a handful of angry vampire. The two men with Gren pulled out automatic weapons. It was a smart move inside a neutral zone. Not using magic meant the defenses wouldn't activate, and my guess was that Gren the Monstrous wasn't overly concerned about damage from bullets. I would strongly suggest against this course of action, Roth said as he dangled a few feet off the floor. I saw him make a subtle gesture with his hand, and the restaurant began to empty. If you leave the premises now, this incident will be forgotten. If not, I drew Ebonsole and grabbed the edge of the table as I saw Gren shift his weight. Katya saw me move and slid closer to me. I flipped the table as Gren threw Roth across the restaurant, and the two men opened fire. Chapter 4. Roth destroyed several of the tables on his way across the restaurant. The solid table offering us cover shattered as Gren drove a fist through it. Katya rolled to the side as I leaped forward. I slashed Gren several times with Ebonsole. It was about as effective as slashing granite with a butter knife. I jumped back and looked at him. What are you? He roared in response. Then he grew. Muscles tore through clothing as he added several more feet to his stature. Gren took a step forward, sending a tremor through the restaurant when his two assistants were introduced to the wall behind us with force. Roth was walking back, and he didn't look pleased. Gren whirled around as Roth closed the distance in an instant and drove an uppercut into Gren's chin, rocking his head back. Roth shook out his hand and looked on in wonder as the large man laughed and took a step back. Moving faster than anything that size had the right to move, Gren drove a fist into Roth's midsection, launching him through the window and into the McLaren parked outside, destroying it. Roth shook it off and stalked back inside. The McLaren, or what was left of it, looked less like the height of automotive engineering and more like a Picasso sculpture. Gren laughed again, and I turned in time to see him pull out a small black box from the pocket of one of the unconscious assistants. He rubbed a hand over it, and I saw a red glow flare from under the Lamborghini. I grabbed Katya and pulled her with me. We dived behind the large bar as the Lamborghini detonated. Smoking fragments of the Aventador buried themselves in the walls of Masa like shrapnel. Roth, now joined by 5 more members of the Dark Council, kept his distance and drew a .500 Smith & Wesson Magnum. I looked around and saw the other council members had the same kind of weapon. Calling it a gun would be like saying Little Boy and Fat Man were just bombs. Roth gave a signal, I ducked, and they opened fire. Gren roared again, and then I heard the huge thump. I peeked over the bar and saw the unconscious Gren doing his best impression of a pincushion. He was full of very large, angry-looking darts. Roth stepped over to the bar. His suit was torn in several places. Scratches and bruises already covered one side of his face. He reached behind the bar and pulled out a phone. "This is Neutral Zone 002, he said, looking around. "Threat contained. Send extraction and reconstruction teams. I want to open by tomorrow night." He hung up, removed his jacket, and proceeded to give the other council members instructions. Gren lay immobile in the middle of the floor. "Katya," I said when she stepped out from behind the bar, "those harmless old men you were talking about, who exactly are they?" "One of Father's clients. They belong to the Penumbra Consortium." She straightened out her dress and adjusted her thigh sheath, which held a large dagger. She smiled when she caught me looking. "Can't be too careful." I groaned and turned to face the approaching Roth. "It appears this gentleman," he glanced at Gren's prone body, "is in the employ of the consortium and will be returned to them," Roth said, looking at me. "It would seem you have angered some powerful individuals, Mr. Strong." "Me?" I said, shocked at the accusation. "They weren't here for me." The Penumbra Consortium was the older, darker, angrier European version of the Dark Council. Heavy hitters with long memories and longer reach. Katya, or more likely her father Dmitri, had pissed off the wrong people, a neighborhood I was incredibly familiar with. Roth nodded as if to say, sure they weren't, and stepped over to Katya. "Does the lady need anything?" Roth said, handing Katya a napkin and a glass of water. "Please accept my apologies on behalf of Masa. Your next meal here is complimentary. Sans reservation." "Thank you," I said with a sigh. I'd had to call in a few favors just to get the reservation last week. The wait list was insane. "I really appreciate it." "I was referring to the lady." Roth turned to look at me. "As for you, Mr. Strong, I was informed to give you this message by Mr. Nakatomi. Tell Strong that if I see him when I get there, I'll be the last thing he sees." "He sounds upset," I said, grabbing my jacket and sheathing Ebonsole. "Does he know this isn't my fault?" "Quite," Roth said. "He also made mention of telling his sister about your presence here, without her." "Shit," I muttered. "That would be bad." "Ms. Nakatomi's presence here would complicate matters exponentially," Roth said with a nod. "The best thing would be to leave the premises under your own volition, while you still can." "We need to go," I said, grabbing Katya's hand. "I know a place we can go and be left alone." "Coming?" Katya nodded, and we left Masa. We walked down 8th Avenue and hailed a taxi. I normally avoided New York City taxicabs because I've grown fond of living, but with both vehicles totaled, we had no choice. We jumped into the back of a taxi, and I pulled out my phone. I dialed Monty and got his voicemail. He'd really taken the night off. 23rd and Broadway, the Flatiron Building, I said, as the driver pulled off and headed downtown. "This place is secure." Katya looked behind us nervously as we pulled away. Chapter 5. Flat Earth was located on the roof of the Flatiron Building. It wasn't a Dark Council neutral zone, but it was an exclusive club. Piero Roselli, who owned several businesses in the city, owned it. This wasn't as upscale as Roselli's, his premier restaurant, but it was private. "I need to know why the consortium wants you," I said, pulling out my phone and pressing the speed dial for the only one I knew who would have the answer. After a few seconds of the signal bouncing all over the world, I heard his voice. "Simon, what are you doing on top of the Flatiron Building?" "Staying alive, hack." I scanned the horizon as I turned. What can you tell me about NovaCorp and the consortium? I heard the punching of keys. Nothing good, he said hurriedly after a moment. Consortium is cleaning house. Oh, shit. What? The woman standing next to you right now wouldn't happen to be Katya Novakova, would it? I refrained from looking around. What the hell, Hack? We live in a digital world, Simon. Cameras everywhere, he said. Are you on a date? You look sharp. Does your vampire know? Cut the shit. What about her? She's toxic. More tapping of the keyboard. Consortium wants her ghosted. Something about NovaCorp withholding information and the loss of funds by one Dmitry Novakova. Bottom line, Consortium wants her erased and is using... Whoa. What now? They've unleashed a troll? He said in disbelief. Do those things even exist? This one goes by Gren, I finished. Extra large, hard to kill, bad manners. Yes, they exist, and this one is particularly nasty. Can you locate Monty for me? You have incoming, and it looks like what you just described, he said. If I was you, and I'm glad I'm not right now, I would cut that date short. I'll contact Montague. Where is he? I looked over the edge of the roof. I need an exit that doesn't introduce us to the pavement at terminal velocity. It, is killing the feeds as he goes through the lower level. That thing is a killing machine, Hack said with admiration. Wow, Simon, when you piss someone off, you go big. In this case, huge. Hack, focus. I heard the impending destruction as Gren made his way to us. I need the fastest exit off the roof that doesn't require us to jump over the edge. North side. There's a staircase to the lower level. Go. Now. Hack out. I grabbed Katya and ran for the north side as the staircase leading to the scenic rooftop restaurant exploded behind us. Time to go. Chapter 6. We got to the top of the metal staircase that was leading down as Gren roared. I made sure Katya went ahead of me as I turned for a quick look. Gren was closing the distance, fast. I jumped over the edge and landed one level below the roof. Gren had destroyed the lower level of the club. Several bodies lay on the floor. Their uniforms told me it was club security. They must have unsuccessfully tried to stop Gren. What is that thing? Katya asked as we ran down the stairs. Why is he chasing you? Me? I nearly yelled as we descended the stairs. Your father pissed off the wrong people. These people don't send you angry emails, Kat. They send angry trolls. She had taken off the shoes and was racing down the stairs. The Chanel gown had gone through some alterations as well, and was more miniskirt than dress at this point. I've done nothing. She looked up when she heard the roar several stories above us. I saw the genuine fear in her eyes, and I knew she was telling the truth. But I think Father has. We made it to the ground floor. Apparently, trolls don't navigate narrow staircases well. We headed for the back exit when I heard the crashing of concrete and metal outside. A few seconds later, the large form of Gren landed in front of the building. That's one way to deal with a narrow staircase. I grabbed Katya and ran for the back as my phone rang. Your hack friend interrupted my dinner. Something about a troll? It was Monty. Why does Massa look like a war zone? I'm leaving Flat Earth, being chased by a troll, I said as the front entrance exploded into the lobby. An angry, persistent troll. I looked at Katya, who somehow manages to know where my date is without GPS. Get outside to Madison Square Park. I'll be waiting, Monty said. Try to leave your troll friend behind. Hilarious. I kicked open the back door and came out on Fifth Avenue. The park was to my right and a block away. In the distance, I saw a flash of blue light and Monty waved at me. We took off at a dead run. Behind us, the wall exploded with a roar as masonry slammed into cars in the street. Strong! Gren yelled, shaking some of the building's windows. All the running clearly didn't amuse him.
I'm going to crush you and suck on your bones, and then I'm going to crush Miss Novakova.
That's just gross, I said as we crossed the street. And how am I suddenly a target? I stopped in the middle of 23rd Street and made sure Katya crossed to the other side as Monty led her to the teleportation circle before joining me. He tossed me a magazine, and I slammed it into Grim Whisper, putting one in the chamber. The black wisps of energy let me know they were entropy rounds. "So how is your date progressing?" Monty said as he formed a large orb of air. "Looks like an eventful evening so far." "Piero is going to kill me for destroying Flat Earth," I said as we closed the distance on the approaching Gren. "Troll was sent by the consortium to tie off a loose end." "Meaning your date?" Monty asked, and I nodded. "Seems like NovaCorp is being liquidated." I glanced back at the nervous Katya. Dmitri must have skimmed off the wrong account. He always was a slimy bastard. "An actual troll?" Monty asked as he released the orb. "I always thought they were smaller and inhabited layers under bridges. Maybe this one is in between bridges." I emptied the magazine in Gren's chest as he screamed. The orb hit him a second later and flung him back into the lobby of the Flatiron Building. I looked back at Monty, impressed. "What did you hit him with?" I asked, surprised. "Your orbs don't usually do that kind of damage." Gren roared. Clearly, it wasn't enough. Monty turned and started running back to the teleportation circle. "We need to regroup." I saw Katya standing in the center of the circle. She gave me a worried wave as we crossed 23rd Street again, and then she disappeared. Chapter 7. "Where did you send her?" I looked around the entrance to the park, but Katya was gone. "Why did you teleport her?" "I didn't teleport her anywhere." Monty looked down at the circle. "I don't see any remains of your date, and the circle hasn't been activated." "Is that supposed to be encouraging?" I said, examining the area around the circle. "If you didn't teleport her, where did she go?" "There are very few creatures that could snatch an adult female without leaving bloody remains." He looked up at me. "This has all the markings of your—" "Michiko," I whispered, and Monty nodded. "Shit. Why would she take Katya?" Monty gave me a "you can't be that dense" look. "Katya's father is going to be quite displeased that you lost his daughter." Monty looked across the street and narrowed his eyes. "Although we may have more pressing concerns at the moment." "I didn't lose her," I snapped back and turned at the roar coming from the Flatiron Building. "It's not like she's a cell phone I misplaced. Someone or something took her." "A perfectly rational explanation," Monty said as he gestured, causing the runes in the circle to brighten. "I'm sure Mr. Novakova, does he still go by the Butcher of Georgia, or has he mellowed with age? In any case, I'm certain he will be pleased to know you didn't lose her. She was just taken while out with you. That makes all the difference." I'm all cheered up now. I looked at the glowing runes in the teleportation circle. Dmitri will be pissed if that troll flattens Katya. "I told you this date was ill-advised," Monty said. "We need to go." The facade of the Flatiron that faced north, the point of the triangle-shaped building, erupted in a shower of stone and debris. Gren lumbered out of the building, pushing large pieces of the destroyed wall out of his way. "He looks unhappy," I said, as Monty traced more runes around us. The circle flared, and Gren began running at us. I emptied an entire magazine of entropy rounds into Mr. Angry Troll. "I think it's time we invested in an RPG. Or do you have a troll-begone nuke spell?"
I'm going to crush the bitch. Then you die, little man,
Gren rasped as he closed the distance. I saw him stop in the middle of the street, look around, and sniff the air before turning south at a dead run ignoring us. "Little man?" I said, looking around. "Did he mean me?" "It's clear he meant you," Monty sniffed. "I've never been referred to as little anything. Amazing how your motivational talks always end up doing the opposite. If it's any consolation, you are an enormous source of daily aggravation." "Not helping," I scowled in response. "Let's get out of here." Monty nodded, placing a hand on the circle, and then the world went white. When it came back into focus, we were standing in our office. Michiko, wearing a black trench coat, stood in the center of our reception area with a shocked Katya sitting on the couch. My stomach clenched, forcing me to rush to the bathroom. I want to say it was the effect of the teleportation, not the expression of restrained lethality on Chi's face, that caused my gastric distress. Chapter 8. "Who is this woman to you?" Michiko looked briefly at Katya before fixing her gaze on me again as I returned to the reception area. "How do you know her?" It wasn't the words, but rather the tone that made me pause. This was one of those crossroads questions, and my life could be filled with untold pain depending on how I answered. I opted for living dangerously because honesty is always better than deception. Clearly a suicidal thought, considering the situation. "She's my date," I said. "Her name is Katya Novikova, and she's in danger." "Not as much as you are right now," Monty muttered and went to the kitchen. "Would anyone like some tea and biscuits? It will make a sparse oval, but it will suffice as a funeral feast." Katya raised a shaky hand and moved to the kitchen. They were a play of contrasts. Michiko was a slight, tiny woman, barely topping 5 feet, her long black hair pulled tight into a braid behind her. Katya was tall and statuesque. Her golden mane of disheveled hair flowed around her as she moved in the kitchen next to Monty. Michiko stood motionless. Her emotionless black eyes followed me as I moved to the office I shared with Monty. She appeared in the office a moment later, radiating quiet menace, which was her default presence. "Do you love this woman?" Michiko asked quietly. I enjoyed living on the edge, but I wasn't that suicidal. "No, she's a friend, and her father is mixed up in something shady." I placed my hand on a section of the wall, and a panel slid back, revealing a large strongbox. I pulled it out and placed it on the desk next to the wall. "I have to help her." "She is quite beautiful," Chi said, staring at me. "I can see the attraction." The voice in my head broke out the megaphone and semaphore flags, along with a few neon signs warning me not to agree. "She's stunning, but I'm not attracted, was just out on a date, trying to enjoy a non-magical, non-lethal dinner with quiet company." I grabbed a few more magazines of entropy rounds and reloaded Grim Whisper. I grabbed Ebonsoul and attached it to my thigh. That plan, of course, crashed and burned once Gren the Terror Troll showed up. Chi raised an eyebrow. "This is your definition of dinner attire?" she said as I adjusted the thigh sheath. "She has a troll after her, sent by the consortium." "I know. Her father has stolen from the elders of the consortium," she said, and stepped close to me. "I will ask one more time to make certain. Do you love this woman?" Something about the way she asked this time made me take notice. "I'm taken." I stared straight into her eyes. "You may know her. She happens to be the psycho-vampire leader of the Dark Council." "That answer is the only reason your date will see the light of another day." She smiled and placed a hand on my cheek. "Our bond is deeper than blood, Simon." She pointed at Ebonsoul, and it's the reason you wield the means to undo me." A cough interrupted us. Monty stood at the door. Michiko stepped back. "I hate to interrupt this tender moment, but Ms. Novikova is currently being tracked by a large, angry troll," he said, sipping more of his tea. "I think I know how." "How?" I said, and grabbed another magazine of entropy rounds, really wishing we had a rocket launcher. "He can smell her perfume?" "Close," Monty said with a nod. "He's using something like runic radar. She's been marked by an inhibiting tracker rune. It's too complicated to undo, and teleportation is out of the question. My guess is the consortium wanted to make sure Dmitri returned what he stole." "By unleashing a troll on his daughter?" I asked, incredulous. "Isn't that overkill? No pun intended?" Monty groaned and shook his head. "By sending a message," Michiko said. "The troll will only be the beginning. The consortium will destroy Novacorp and the rest of his family, and finally Dmitri, if he doesn't comply." "Can we stop it?" I asked. "Entropy rounds only tickled it." "We can, but it will have to be together," Michiko said, and headed back to the reception area with Monty and me in tow. "Your date will need to fight for her life as well. It's the only way." "You want Katya to face an unstoppable mountain of hate sent to make her a memory?" I asked in disbelief. "Only if she wants to live," she said, looking at Katya, who had changed out of the Chanel and into combat gear. "Do you want to live, Ms. Novikova?" Katya nodded. "Yes, I would like to," Katya said quietly. "I have grown fond of my life." "Your runed dagger," she held out her hand to Katya. "May I see it?" Katya opened her eyes in surprise and handed Chi the dagger she carried. "How did you know?" "Someone knew they would send a troll after you." Chi looked over the dagger and gave a short nod before returning it. "This is a unique weapon. Who gave you this?" "I was instructed to keep it on me at all times." Katya returned the dagger to its sheath. "My head of security gave it to me." "Oh no. Do you think—" "They aren't the target. You are," she said. "Your dagger was designed with a specific purpose. With a little assistance, we may be able to stop this creature." "How did you know about the troll?" I asked. "I had to use back channels." "The consortium and the council aren't allies, but we do inform each other of activity engaged in each other's region of influence out of mutual respect," she said, and adjusted her holster. I noticed she carried a .500 Smith & Wesson Magnum, like Roth and the rest of the council members in Massa. "Is that standard issue?" I pointed at the hand cannon. "That thing is longer than my arm." Michiko gave me a slight smile. "When a rampant troll is in your city, you plan accordingly," she said, and patted the gun. "This will only get its attention. You and your date will have to finish it." Chapter 9. By the time we stood outside the Moscow, Robert had pulled up silently in the Black Phantom. Each of Sunatran's drivers was highly trained. They could execute tight J-turns and other evasion-style techniques to ensure the safety of their passengers. The bottomless pit, known as the trunk, was dubbed Pandora's Box because it contained just a little of everything and was all designed to cause pain or explode, and in most cases, both. With a push of a button, Robert opened the doors as we approached. He was the only driver I knew in the years we had used Sunatran. He was stockily built with quick eyes and lightning-fast reflexes. "Robert," I said, and nodded when we got inside. "Battery Park, please."
"Yes, sir, Mr. Strong. Right away," he said with a slight accent.
Battery Park? Monty asked. It was about an hour from the time we left Massa until Gren the Unstoppable caught up with us at Flat Earth. I checked the time. I don't know how he's using this runic radar, but he's going to be close by now. Battery Park will be ideal, she said, looking out of the window. At this time of night, it's empty. Do you think the Council, I started. The Dark Council won't violate this contract. She stared out the window. The repercussions from the consortium would be devastating. But you're here, I said, confused. You're the leader of the Dark Council. No, she turned to face me. Her look erased any further questions. I'm here to make sure this troll leaves my city, dead or alive. There are limited ways of achieving this. Eliminate the troll or the target, Monty said. Since Miss Novakova is still breathing, it seems we're going with the first option. For now, she whispered, and looked out of the window again. Does this thing have any weaknesses? I asked, checking Grim Whisper. I emptied a magazine of entropy rounds and slashed it with Ebonsol with no effect. This creature is resistant to magic and has only one weak point. The eyes, she said, and glanced at Katya. Ebonsol will only slow it down, even if you surrender to the blade. To stop the troll, its eyes must be pierced with a soul render. A what? The blade your date carries, she said, pointing at the dagger on Katya's hip. I may be able to incapacitate it for a short while, but she must stab its eyes with her dagger. Oh, only stab it in the eyes? I said in disbelief. At least it's not a small thermal exhaust port right below the main port. That would be difficult. Trolls do not possess ports. What are you referring to? She waved my words away. I said the eyes. Never mind. I holstered Grim Whisper. Will your darts knock it out? They were ineffective at Massa, she whispered. The creature should have been unconscious for hours. It rose after 20 minutes and destroyed the neutral zone. It will take months to restore the restaurant. That wasn't my fault. Who made the reservation? In this case, the best response was no response. Can anyone else do this? Monty asked, breaking the silence. I don't know if Ms. Novakova will be up to the task. No, she shook her head slowly. She is the target. She must perform the rending and undo the tether binding her to the creature. I can do it, Katya whispered, placing a hand on the dagger. I must. If not, your life ends, she said matter-of-factly. Either way, the creature will leave this city tonight. The Phantom came to a stop, and Robert opened the doors. You two really know how to cheer people up, I said as I jumped out of the car. You should start an inspirational irony motivational course. I'm sure it would be packed. Will that be all, sir? Robert asked, closing the doors after us. One more thing, Robert, I said, as I heard a distant roar. Drive away as fast as you can. This place is going to become hazardous to your health. Robert tipped his cap, entered the Phantom, and drove away. I looked around. In front of us sat the squat Castle Clinton National Monument. It was a circular building with an open courtyard in the center. If you needed to contain an angry, indestructible troll, it was perfect. In there, I said, pointing at the heavy iron doors. Monty, you think you can— The door swung inward and slammed against the wall, shattering the stone as Chi entered the castle first. That was subtle, I said, following her inside. Chi unholstered her hand cannon. We aren't here to be subtle. She checked to make sure each of the chambers held a round. I seriously doubted 5 shots would be enough. We're here to be efficient. A boulder the size of a small car sailed past us and into the opposite wall with a crash. Angry troll, incoming. I moved to the side and made sure Katya was out of the line of fire. Stay hidden until it's down. I joined Chi and Monty in the center of the courtyard. Chapter 10.
You can't hide her from me.
Gren entered the castle, ripping the door off its hinges.
We are bound. I will find her.
Doesn't matter if you find her, I drew Grim Whisper. You can't have her. Gren sniffed the air, narrowed his eyes at Chi, and stopped walking.
Vampire, you would help a human?
Will you leave this woman unharmed? Chi asked, taking aim with the hand cannon. Gren smiled, flexed his fingers, and cracked his neck. I'm not an expert at body language, but that looks like a no, I said, stepping back.
I have one target. Her.
Gren pointed where Katya hid.
If you release her to me, I will leave. If you refuse, I will kill all of you and reduce your city to rubble.
How about, instead, we refuse, you leave, and we aren't forced to erase you, I asked. That sounds like a win-win. Laughter filled the castle as Gren charged at us. Monty and Chi fanned out to either side as Gren came straight at me. Monty unleashed several orbs of white-hot flame as Chi fired her elephant darts. They both hit the large mountain of ugly troll with little effect. I unloaded Grim Whisper and may as well have been using rubber bullets. I grabbed Ebonsoul and leaped to the side as Gren brought a fist down where I'd stood a second earlier, cratering the ground. I slashed his arm, and he roared as I managed to scratch him. For a second, I doubted Ebonsoul's edge as I saw the wound heal on his arm.
Magic and venom will not stop me,
Gren said, brushing the darts off his body. He moved faster than I expected and buried a fist in my chest, launching me into the wall and shattering the brick.
Your blade may cut, but it will not rend.
I slid off the wall and fell to the ground, my body flushed with heat to deal with the damage as I heard him close in on me. I looked up through the haze of pain and saw him raise a foot to stomp me into oblivion. A blast of air filled the courtyard, catapulting Gren over the wall and out of the castle. I heard the splash a few seconds later as he landed in the Hudson River.
Thanks, Monty,
I croaked and tried to catch a breath. Can you launch him farther away? Like Alaska? He's resistant to magic, even indirectly, Monty said, giving me a hand as I stood shakily. You need to negate that, or this won't end well. Not end well, I said, rubbing my chest as I felt my body heal. It's not starting well either. Simon, stop trying to use the blade and let it use you, Chi said, and loaded more monster darts into her gun. If you focus and stop toying with it, we can bring its defenses down and end this threat. I stared at her. Toying with it? I took a deep breath. Are you serious? One side of the castle exploded in a shower of bricks. Monty cast a shield as debris fell around us. I looked through the gap in the wall and saw several large boats capsized or sinking into the river.
Time to die,
Gren said as he walked through the gaping hole in the wall. I felt the cold coming off Monty as he nodded at me. Chi fired again, and I raced at Gren. That voice, the one that warned me of ultra-bad choices, was screaming about how being immortal didn't matter if I was torn to pieces. Gren slid forward, and Monty hit him with a blast of cold air.
I told you, magic doesn't work on me, little man,
Gren said, and swiped at my head. I ducked under the arm and unleashed Ebonsoul. The runes on its blade flared to life as I thrust it into Gren's chest. It cut through his skin and penetrated. I pushed it in as it siphoned the troll's life force and filled me with power. He wasn't using the magic against you, I said, as I forced myself to let go of the blade and step back. Ice encased Gren from the neck down, immobilizing him as he struggled in vain. He was using it on the water you're covered in. Gren glared at me and then laughed.
This can't hold me forever.
The sound of cracking ice filled the night.
I will be free and crush you first.
Now, Katya, I yelled, and she stepped out from her hiding spot. You won't get another chance.
What can she do?
Gren mocked as Katya approached.
She has no magic, no power, and no weapon.
I have this. Katya pulled out her dagger, and Gren's eyes widened slightly. This can stop you.
A soul render.
Gren's voice held a tinge of fear.
Put that away before you hurt someone.
She holstered her gun as Monty stepped close and gestured. A blue rune descended over the ice, solidifying it. He's correct. Monty looked at Katya. The ice won't contain him indefinitely. You need to act now. Katya held the blade over Gren's face as he stared at her. I loaded another magazine of entropy rounds into Grim Whisper. Katya raised an arm and hesitated. What if it doesn't stop him? Her hand shook slightly. What if he comes after me again?
This won't do anything, Gren whispered. I'll come for you and rip you apart. You can't stop me.
I won't live in fear. Katya's hand grew still. Tonight, you die. The ice cracked, and Gren managed to free one arm. Katya brought the soul render down twice, removing his eyes. Gren screamed into the night as I fired the Grim Whisper, bringing silence. A rune appeared on Katya's cheek, flared, and disappeared. In moments, the entropy rounds dissolved Gren's body, leaving a large mound of melting ice and the ebon soul. I sheathed the blade and noticed the figures standing at the periphery of the castle. Yours? I looked at Chi as she nodded. My personal god is never far. Sirens wailed in the distance as she stepped close to me and placed a hand on my chest. Your date will need to be returned to her father. The council will handle her extradition. What about the consortium? I asked. They won't be happy about how this turned out. I'll inform them that your agency felt it was imperative to deal with the threat their troll posed to the city, she said, and motioned with her hand. Several of her guard appeared next to Katya. If you like, I can tell them it was the result of your date. No thanks. I heard the distinct sirens and saw the blue flashing lights of the NYTF getting closer to the park. The troll threat story is fine. Katya stepped close, but not too close, as she glanced over at Chi. I want to say thank you for the evening, but this isn't what I had in mind when you said date. Take care, Simon. You too, Cat. Michiko grabbed my chin and gently turned my head to face her. The next time you want to go on a date, she whispered into my ear, don't. She stepped back and motioned again. She disappeared along with Katya and her guard. An NYTF cruiser pulled into the castle and skidded to a stop several feet away. Ramirez got out, took a deep breath, and walked over to where we stood. Why does half of my city look like a damn war zone, Strong? He said in his best outside voice, bleeding ear levels. I have several destroyed restaurants, a demolished landmark building, city streets that look jackhammered, dead bodyguards, destroyed luxury vehicles, and now a national monument. Half of a national monument in ruins. He went on a date, Monty said, pulling out a phone. I told him it was a bad idea. I was about to speak when Ramirez held up a hand. No, he said, barely containing the explosion of rage. Just go. Get out of my sight. Don't call me. I don't want to see or hear from you for a month, at least. I looked around at the devastation as we walked out of the castle and into Battery Park. A string of Spanish curses followed us out as Ramirez started giving orders to his men. A black phantom glided silently up the street and stopped at the corner. I'm just going to say that none of this was my fault. I turned back to view the devastation Gren had wreaked on the park. Maybe I should tell him it was a troll? I doubt it will make a difference. Monty dialed a number on his phone and looked at me. Roselli's, you may want to inform Piero about Flat Earth before he calls you. I groaned. Fine. Besides, I'm starving. Robert opened the door of the Phantom. I never got to enjoy dinner at Massa. Well, never let it be said your dates are boring, Monty said with the hint of a smile. When is the next one? There's still much of the city left intact, you know. Such humor and wit. I jumped in the car. I don't know how you manage to contain yourself. It's not easy, he said, getting in after me. Roselli's, Robert.
Yes, sir.
Robert slid in behind the wheel and pulled away.
We may have to take a few detours. The city seems to have been under attack this evening. Many of the main streets are closed for construction.
Monty sat back. Understood, he said, and glanced at me. Take the safest route. Avoid the damage. Simon has had an eventful evening and would prefer some peace and quiet. I'm never going to live this down, am I? I asked, as Robert raised the partition with a tip of his hat. Do you think this will blow over? Are you asking if this date night will fade into memory? Yes, exactly that. Well, it depends, Monty rubbed his chin. The Dark Council has a destroyed, high-profile neutral zone. The consortium will certainly remember your involvement with their troll assassin. Piero and the vampire community won't forget the devastation of Flat Earth. It was a hot spot for them. Forget I asked. Not to mention Ramirez, the NYTF, and the city now have a major reconstruction plan underway due to your evening of frivolity. So, no, it won't fade away, I asked, knowing the answer. And there was no frivolity. None. Monty closed his eyes and shook his head slowly, the hint of a smile still on his lips. I think it's safe to say this date will be with you for quite some time. The end. This has been The Date, a Montague and Strong Detective Agency short, written by Orlando A. Sanchez, narrated by Kevin T. Collins. Copyright 2017 by Orlando A. Sanchez. Production copyright 2021 by Orlando A. Sanchez.